Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker. Shame is debilitating. It ruins relationships, thwarts growth, and destroys hope. It can masquerade as various problems, guilt, envy, pride, resentment, but until you heal the core issue, freedom will remain out of reach. Our next guest, Dr. Mark Baker, has received a PhD in clinical psychology, master's degree in theology, as well as a certificate in psychodynamic psychotherapy. He serves as the executive director of the Levy Counseling Centers in Pasadena and Santa Monica, California. He's the author of several books, including Jesus, the Greatest Therapist Who Ever Lives, which has more than 2 million copies in print. He joins us the second Friday of every month at 12 o'clock. He's the author of Overcoming Shame, Let Go of Others' Expectations, and Embrace God's Acceptance. And we welcome him here as our good friend to talk about overcoming shame with Dr. Mark Baker. Mark, welcome to the program.
Good to see you, Eric. It's always good. I look forward to our conversations.
And so do I. You are truly a brother to me, and I have shared before that I have a couple of safe people in my life, and over the years that you have been a part of this program, you have become a brother to me, a safe person to me, someone that in the middle of the night, in a very hurt and troubled moment, when I thought about who can I reach out to, I reached 3,000 miles away, and you answered me. And you answered me in a way that was affirming, confirming, and challenging, which is your style, is to affirm, to confirm, and then to challenge. And so you treated me as a friend and as a patient and in all the ways, and as a brother, and you were there for me during the process and the follow-up, and I thank you for that. It means the world to me. There's so many things like what you and I discussed, and family situations, good, bad, really, really bad, awful, terrible, the worst, all exist out there. And they begin to manifest in different ways, but they go back to a common point, and that is a point of origin of where the shame encounter or the shame occurrence began. And we talked, and we just touched on it briefly last month, that for the last 10 years, the suicide rate in America, or even across the world, has increased.
Yes, it has.
And I find that so disconcerting because I don't understand the concept of suicide. It's something that I don't comprehend.
Right. So many of us don't, unless you've been in that state. It's hard to imagine. Plus, during this time that the suicide rate has increased, and actually it's been increasing for the last several decades, for the last 3 decades. During that time, we've eradicated more poverty in the world than we've ever done before in any time in history. So as we've become more prosperous, our suicide rate has gone up. It's ironic. It's hard for us to understand. Wait, we're living better lives. We're lifting ourselves out of poverty, and we're killing ourselves more often. In the United States, there are about 50,000 people that successfully commit suicide every year. That's more than the homicides in our country. We're killing ourselves more than we're killing other people in the United States. And there's something terribly wrong about that. And it makes your mind, it boggles your mind. And for those of us who are sort of sitting and thinking rationally and maybe emotionally not feeling too bad about our lives, it's hard to imagine why you'd want to stop it. So I think it's important for us to have this conversation because, and you and I talked about this, or this conversation today was triggered by the fact that a pastor who was very loved here in Southern California, who committed his life to helping people struggle with mental health problems, himself took his own life. Now, I've known other cases of this, of pastors taking their own lives. Now, that's really mind-bending. You know, how could that possibly be? Those of us who know the truth about life, how would it be possible for us to take our own lives? And I know there are people listening to this conversation right now who have had those thoughts, and some of them are having those thoughts right now. They're wondering, how do I go on? Or maybe my life would be better if it just ended today. Or even some are more serious, thinking they're either actually contemplating taking their lives today. So I think our conversation today is an important one. We want to invite people into this space where we can be honest about something that is growing in its problem in our prosperous times. So and you and I know this, that wealth, prosperity, and fame doesn't protect us from the real issues. The real issues, the real battles in life are with principalities and powers. And those battles are inside of us. And it's a myth for us to think, if only I got richer, if only I got more famous, if only I got more popular, you know, that would solve my struggles. It doesn't. It doesn't. So I welcome this conversation. I think we need to have it.
You know, the pastor we're talking about is Jared Wilson. He was a prominent pastor in California who ran a suicide outreach group, and he took his own life. Now, here was somebody who devoted himself to support people who were struggling with suicidal thoughts. And they were coming to him, meeting group therapy, and exchanging stories, encouraging each other. He was a strong encourager, but he was also a part of his own support group. But aren't we all?
Yeah, right. Yes,
So how do we get to the point where we almost validate? Here's a pastor that says that I've had suicidal thoughts. Do we elevate them to be a person that says, oh, he can be more empathetic and more effective because it's like an alcoholic. I've gone to AA, I've been clean and sober for 25 years, and now I'm going to start a bar ministry. I'm going to go to the saloon, and I'm going to go in there, and I'm going to hear the stories with the other guys, and while they're having their shot in a beer, I'm going to have a ginger ale. Or the Narcotics Anonymous, and while everybody's doing their lines or the guys are running to the restroom, I'm going to be, I've got that problem handled. I've always heard and been taught you don't do that.
Right.
That's not a good course of action. Right. So, and listen, may the Lord have mercy on this poor, troubled soul, and the hearts that were broken, and the perpetuating hopelessness of the message of his own suicide is as tragic as the loss of his own life.
Yes, it is. And that's why this conversation is so important. It's important to start the conversation by realizing there are several reasons people have suicidal thoughts. It's not just one. So there isn't one answer. Women attempt suicide far more often than men, but men are better at it. We're more successful. Those who actually complete suicide, 80% of the time it's men. So we don't think about it much, but when we do it. And for men, usually we use a firearm, so that's why we're so successful. Women try drugs, poisoning, overdoses, and those are not as successful. So that women think about suicide much more often. But when it occurs to a man, he takes a direct and effective path to do it. So we have to take this seriously. And in the vast majority of cases of people who actually take their lives, and I'm certain this was true for Jerry, they're suffering from a major depression. They're suffering from a disease. This is a biological disease that actually changes your biology. And this is important, it changes the biology of your brain. And so the brain cannot function in the same way. So this is really important for actually most people who are hearing this conversation. If they're having suicidal thoughts, the thought of taking your own life, it's very likely you are suffering from a biological disease called depression, and it changes your thoughts. The substances in your brain are out of balance, and it's going to cause you to think in ways that are actually distorted. You're going to catastrophize more. Something that's a little problem becomes a big problem. You're going to think the hopelessness takes over, where you begin to think, well, I can't do that, or this is no good, or that'll never be solved. How am I going to live without my boyfriend now? You have this hopelessness that is toxic, and this comes from the imbalance in your brain of this substance substances that are out of balance. And hopelessness is a central feature of suicidality. And we think that we as people of faith are immune to hopelessness. We are not. There's a difference between faith and hope. Those are two different things. And actually, the most tragic state of being is to be a person of faith who lacks hope. A person who knows there's a God. I believe God's miraculous power. I see God's miraculous power, but I've lost hope that it's there for me. So I can believe in God's power, but lost hope in its efficacy for me. This is the worst version of the dark night of the soul, where we feel God's not only torturing us and pruning us to become better, but actually He's abandoned us in the torture. So those of us who are people of faith, we're vulnerable to a particular depth of hopelessness that people who don't have faith are not subject to, because we know there's a God. We see God act miraculously in people's life. But just because I have faith doesn't mean that I've lost hope that God's power will be there for me. And that hopelessness, when you're depressed, is magnified. So if you have this disease of depression, your hopelessness is on steroids.
When in 2013, when I was totally betrayed, and I went to Covenant Christian Counseling to Gil Cracky, who specializes in counseling of pastors who have been betrayed. Now, we're in Birmingham, Alabama. This is not the big metropolitan New York City where you would think that somebody would have a practice that was so specialized.
Yeah, it's specialized, right.
In a little city like this, but we have 2,800 churches in this little burg of 1 million people in the metropolitan area. Now, he is the pastoral care pastor of the largest Anglican church, and so he just has Mondays, and he does 8 appointments on Mondays. But still, when you think about that, that's still a lot.
Yeah.
And so when it came time for me to get a referral, because I wanted to talk about how, as a believer, put in this position, being betrayed by fellow believers, by my board, by my wife, by everybody in my world was now no longer in my world. I was now shunned. I was now an outcast. I was a Quaker. I was a Mennonite. I was out.
Right.
Where I had been an executive on the board, I'm not out. I'm not even. I don't exist. I don't breathe. I'm gone. Out. And it was because of the betrayal that, had the betrayal been revealed, it wasn't that I did anything, it's what they did with what they thought I did. But they so mishandled it that they kept it a secret of how they handled it, because they would have all had to be removed from their own pulpits, their own positions, it would have been a domino effect across an entire, almost denomination, because of the mishandling of it. And so it was easier to say, we'll sacrifice the one, we'll send him out to Azazel, we'll let him disappear, and we'll just go back to normal. And I was like, okay, biblically, there's got to be a way for me to be able to process this and handle this. So I went to a specialist who did that, and in 5 sessions, because I was so steeped in this, looking for the answer, and that's so the sections that he was going to refer me to. I said, "Oh yeah, I already have that. I got that one highlighted." He said, "Okay, then I want you to go and tonight I want you to read this." "Oh no, I've got that one. That one's already highlighted." And here's my notes about this one. And so after 5 weeks, he finally said to me, he said, "Okay, it's enough already." He said, "You know what to do. You've done it. All right, now they've given you the finances to take a year off. Take a year off. You've processed this. You've done this. You've done this by the book. You've released it. Your hands are clean. If Mount Vesuvius consumes all of them, all right, you're nowhere near the lighting of the fuse of Mount Vesuvius. You're completely released. You've been set free. You're fine. I'm not worried about you. I'm releasing you. Goodbye. Go." As a matter of fact, I want you to return to the pulpit, but I want you to return to my pulpit. So a year from now, Holy Week of 2014, I want you to be back preaching again. Okay? The mantle has not been taken from you, as they try to convince you that you wouldn't have ever wound up in this position had it's like the Abimelech going to Abraham and saying, "So tell me, what is it that you saw in me that you thought that I was even capable of doing something like that?"
Right.
It was that kind of scenario. But the point is that we have become the only army in the world that shoots their wounded.
Yeah, that's true. It's sad.
And this sounds to me that Jared Wilson is the poster child now for a clarion call that says that the church must address mental illness within its own community.
Right.
We must remove the stigma
Right.
of people getting treated by psychologists. It can't be a secret that somebody's in counseling. It can't be a secret that we have referrals. It can't be a secret that you're on medication. You should have people that you talk to. And we have to have mental health resources available in churches. Our seminaries need to have coursework, right? You did it.
Right.
And you did it, and I don't know if I ever even asked you, why did you get a master's in theology,
Right.
And a PhD in clinical psychology? It's the most needed merger that exists, but you're like the only one I ever knew that did it.
Well, because I saw that problem decades ago, when I was a young man. I went into the ministry first, right out of college. I went into a campus ministry, worked with college kids. And the particular church that ordained me to ministry did not require a degree in theology. They required you to understand the Bible. And I had a thorough knowledge of the Bible. I'd read it several times. I had been preaching from it for years. And so they said, "Okay, that's all the qualification we need. We're going to hire you to lead our campus ministry at the University of Kansas, where I had graduated." And so I took over this college ministry, and it was thriving within 2 years. In Kansas, you might think Kansas is a conservative, not Lawrence, Kansas, not the University of Kansas. Right. It's a liberal school, and Christianity there is mocked. So it was a hard ground for us to break, but we stood our ground there. And I'm still very close friends with the people I partnered with in ministry there. But what I saw in those 2 years, particularly among college kids, that's where women attempt suicide the most, is during that age. It's the second leading cause of death. Sadly, from 15 to 25-year-olds, the second leading cause of death is suicide. And how crazy is that when they're excited and they're young, they're all beautiful, they're at the university and they're educated. And I saw these, particularly the women, but men too, I saw both, attempting suicide on my watch. And I thought, oh my goodness, how am I going to lead this girl to Christ if she's dead? These kids were coming to me, wanting to hear the good news and attempting to take their lives before they got it. To me, it was in my face. And I remember my grandfather, who was the elder of the little church that I grew up in, with an eighth grade education, having people come over to his house and seek counsel for their lives. And the only book I ever saw him read was the Bible. And I would see these people come over to his house and they'd disappear into his little study and they'd come out wiping their eyes, shaking his hand, saying, "Thank you, Wallace, you've helped me so much." And they'd go on with their lives, these pillars of our community, seeking counsel from this uneducated man other than knowing the Bible. And I remembered that. And I thought, I need to get educated. This isn't the 1920s anymore, like my grandfather was able to do that. So I looked all across the country, and there was one school that was accredited by the American Psychological Association to offer a degree in psychology at a Christian seminary. There was one. It was Fuller Seminary. There was only one in the 80s. And I thought, well, that's it. That's where I'm going to go. And so through actually a series of miracles, I ended up going to Fuller to get what I thought was a much needed blending of understanding what are these troubled emotions that are going on in the lives of people that are keeping them from coming to Christ. And then I've learned later, it's those same troubled emotions that's keeping them from living the Christ-like life. I find so often it's not a lack of Bible knowledge or even a lack of faith that produces problems in the way we treat each other and treat ourselves, but it's an ignorance when it comes to our own emotions, our own emotional life, and blocks there that we're unable to get past. So that was my original impetus to go into this field, and I have been doing it ever since. And I too work with pastors who come to me and have for decades, unable to tell their story. They feel this pressure to be actually an idolizable figure in the community where people need them to be better, to be perfect. It's a way of living vicariously, spiritually through someone else because I'm aware of my own faults. I need to believe there's someone out there that doesn't have them. And the pastors are in this very awkward position where they can't be honest about their struggles. And I have found over the years courageous men and women who show up in my office, men and women of God who are leading the Christian church all over the country, some of them, sit in my office and with tears confess suicidal ideation. I've had a pillar in the Christian church sit in my office and say, "I'm ashamed to admit this, but when I was driving home, I had the thought of just pulling into the other lane of oncoming traffic. Help me understand this. How could I do that? I have 2 kids at home. Help me understand how I'd even have that thought." And then we do the deep dive into these emotions and depression, and how depression changes your thinking. And this is important. Depression not only accentuates hopelessness, but depression accentuates shame. Puts gasoline on this lie that you are unworthy. You are unworthy to be here on the planet. You're unworthy to do your ministry. You're unworthy to be a father, a wife. You're unworthy to be a mother. And depression changes what we believe about ourselves, and we become to believe a lie about ourselves because of this disease of depression. And shame is one of the core aspects of that. What I found is when men and women of God have this disease of depression, which is a real disease that makes you think depressive thoughts, you lose interest in things, you're fatigued, you can't concentrate, every day seems dull, and you lose joy in the things that gave you joy before. This is a real disease. And when you realize you have that and still know God, you then feel utter shame about yourself for having this disease. You don't know it's a disease. You think you're lacking faith. No, it is not an issue of faith. It's an issue of hopelessness. It's an issue of shame, and it's an issue of depression. These can be treated. We can treat these things. And we believed in the lie that, well, it's just because I'm not a good enough Christian. Why would a Christian ever think of taking their own lives? Because they have this disease that needs treatment, and we can treat this disease. Then we feel this shame that makes us feel unworthy to even be here on this planet because we have this disease that we don't understand, that is changing the way we think. So we in the church need to know this. We need to raise our awareness. We need to talk openly about depression. We, as men and women of faith, because the nature of the pastorate is isolating, because others don't want to hear about my faults. They don't want to hear about my struggles. They want to hear about my victories. They're perfectly willing to hear about my struggles if they're over, but they don't want to hear what I'm struggling with now. And where can I go to talk about those things? We have to create space where we can be honest and deal with these emotional struggles of hopelessness and depression and shame, because they will eat away at us until we get to that place where the option of suicide then seems like a real option, because depression distorts your thinking. And one of the reasons people attempt suicide is because they feel so out of control. They feel, I know God. I know God's real. I can't stop these sad feelings. I can't stop this feeling of hopelessness. I can't stop this feeling of worthlessness, which is shame. So then I have to control it. I have to stop this insanity. And the distorted fantasy comes into the mind. Well, how I'll stop it is by stopping my life. I'll move on to heaven, and I'll stop my life here by trying to control feelings that were never meant to be controlled. They were meant to be solved. They were meant to be explored and embraced and tolerated and understood and shared. And in the sharing of those things, we find healing. We don't get to a perfect place, but we get to a place of healing. And believing the lie that I can control it through taking my own life is believing a lie. Now, I don't believe what the Catholic Church teaches is that if you commit suicide, it's an unforgivable sin. There are no unforgivable sins. I don't believe that at all. That's a lie. That's not biblical. I think we make mistakes, and I think suicide is one of them. It is when I've decided to make a permanent decision for what is not a permanent problem. I have a permanent solution for an impermanent problem, and it's a bad choice, but it's not one that God doesn't understand. We have a very, very big God.
You've hit on so many critical issues, and I'm going to throw a challenge out there, because I know that there are presidents of seminaries who have been on this program who actually will go and watch YouTube, and because they'll write to me and tell me. A pastor who is truly pastoral cannot have any friends. Can't. He can have friends from college, he can have friends out of town, but he can't have friends in town.
Right.
He can't pick up the phone and say, hey, let's go bowling, or let's go have dinner together, okay? Because once I've had a conversation with you where you've told me something, it's now pastoral, it's now privileged, and my relationships change, so I cannot have friends. And that's my mindset, and they don't tell you that in school. They don't tell you that in seminary. You can't have friends, okay? So it's not the same. It's not the same job as your buddy has. He's got all kinds of friends, okay? But friends in ministry are different, okay? There was a point in my life where I thought I had no friends. There was a point in my life when I couldn't have reached out to you, because I didn't understand God's economy and what God was calling what I needed in my life as friends were not guys to go to the movies with or to a ball game with. What I needed was a peer friendship. I needed a Mark Baker, that at 2 o'clock in the morning, when I needed a friend, I couldn't call a guy that I would call my friend, because I would wake him up, his kids up, and he wouldn't even understand what I was talking about. Okay?
Right.
But I could send, in the dark of the night with the only screen, I could send you exactly my most intimate personal thought, reaching out to, in that moment, my best friend.
Right.
And that's what God provided me. And so once I had this understanding that all over the world, I have people like this. I'm one of the most blessed men in the world. Now, I don't go bowling, and I don't go to the movies, and I don't go to a lot of ball games, but I'm not alone.
You're
Okay?
not alone.
I'm not
Right.
alone. Okay. Number two, this is something that if you slip and confide to somebody that you think of yourself as a fraud because you can't possibly be a sinner and be in the pulpit preaching against sin when you're out there committing sin. So you must be a fraud.
Right.
So we have this struggle, this war, but Paul talked all about it. It was his struggle too.
Yes.
He did things he ought not to do, and the things he should do, he didn't do. This was the struggle. This was the fraud syndrome. This was the,
Yep.
wait a minute, I know what the scriptures say. I know what I'm supposed to be doing. I know where I'm supposed to be. I know how I'm supposed to be doing it, but I'm not because I'm just a guy. I'm little Polly. I'm
Right.
just little Polly. I'm
Right.
not Rabbi Shaul, the head rabbi of Turkey. I'm little Polly. I'm just some guy that has some guy thoughts. Right? You got real guy thoughts. And so we walk around carrying this mantle of I'm a fraud.
Right.
And I have to be an Academy Award winning fraud. And that's what's going to make me really, really big. And then I'm going to get to the point I'm so big that I'm now isolated. And I have to have 100 people go through before you ever get to me. And then all I have is family. And so that's wonderful. So I expand my family. But because I've expanded my family to a degree, now there's going to be the invitation, the opening that when the enemy comes in, he's going to come running right to one of my kids. All right, and then there's going to be something that's going to bring shame to my ministry.
Right.
Because my kid got picked up for shoplifting, or my kid got picked up in a prostitution ring, or my kid got picked up trying to pick up another guy, or whatever it was. They bring shame to a ministry, and all of a sudden, because this is the calling, and it's the church does not provide that, and the seminary does not provide that. It's not it's not coursework, and it should be. There should be. If you remember, and I know you remember, that there was a point in your life where everything you did for the rest of your life was going to be determined by your cooter preference test. You remember the right? That was going to determine what you were going to be.
That was it. Right.
Right? That was it. Here it is. Says it right here. All right.
Yeah.
I never got the results. I have no idea what I was supposed to be. I never got back my cooter preference test. So I never knew if I was supposed to be a lawyer, and I never received a single piece of counsel, educational counsel, in my life, in elementary school, middle school, private school, boarding school, or college. Somehow or other, when they got to the W's, they just decided they were cutting out the Walker, and that was it. And so I was like this pinball, but I was always hitting the bumper and getting good points. All right, so it wasn't until I, dropped through the hole. This is what happens to people. They drop into that hole, that rabbit hole that Alice dropped into, and so we get lost in this. And this is Jared Wilson, and the after effect is phenomenal. We're talking with Dr. Mark Baker, author of Overcoming Shame and the book Jesus, the Greatest Therapist Who Ever Lived. We don't talk enough about that book. Still one of the best books ever written today about the greatest therapist, the therapist that I see every day, several times a day. But Dr. Mark Baker, who joins us here on the second Friday of every month at 12 o'clock as we talk about overcoming shame. And today we're talking about, 1 in 5 adults have experienced a mental health issue. 1 in 5 have experienced a mental health issue. I know I have. You have confessed you have. Mm-hmm. We've talked to other people and guests who've been on the program. They have. And we have demonized something that should be not demonized. It should be brought out in the open because it's a real struggle, and it's something that the church is going to have to step up. Maybe you don't spend $50,000 of your mission budget going to paint houses in Honduras. Maybe you set up $50,000 and you get a young starting out psychologist and put them on staff, and you start out by putting all of your staff through mandatory counseling, and you start right there with everybody who walks in that building as an employee and gets paid to have them go through counseling so that they can help themselves before they get too far down the path, and start there and then make it available to the congregation. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll continue with Overcoming Shame with Dr. Mark Baker. We'll be right back. The Lord meets you right where you are, and so does Igniting a Nation's new live streaming outlets. You can now watch Revealing the Truth, Revealing the Bible, and Prophecy Revealed simulcast live each Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 1 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time on YouTube Live, Facebook Live, Vimeo, Periscope, and through our website, www.ignitinganation.com. No matter what device you are using, our program will automatically scale so you won't have to miss a single program. And if you happen to miss an episode, you can always subscribe to the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel and access over 1,000 interviews and never miss your favorite authors, special guests, and topics that interest you the most.
There are lots of ways to see Israel, but nothing compares to seeing the land of the book and the people of the book through the eyes of two Jewish believers who can take you on a journey that will bring the entire Bible to life. When you join Rabbi Eric Walker and his #1 rated tour guide, Edo Canaan, in Israel, you'll experience incredible teachings, first-class accommodations, and actually walk where Jesus walked. You will experience the Bible transforming from black and white into living color, and you will never see the Bible in the same way again. For more information, visit us at www.ignitinganation.com/events.
The Lord contends with what contends with you, and Igniting a Nation is committed to bringing to light each and every issue that faces a believer's life. Our live stream programming and teachings take you on a journey to finding biblical truth from a wide variety of experts who share their insights into a deeper walk with the Lord. We have assembled the most comprehensive panel of experts in the fields of prophecy, caregiving, healing from trauma, shame, and abuse, and so much more. We continue to expand our teachings and programming to meet your needs. We're committed to healing the nations with biblical truth. Visit www.ignitinganation.com to develop a deeper walk with the Lord and start your journey to a transformed life. The Bible commands us to study to show ourselves approved, but most study using Bible study tools and not actually studying the Bible chapter and verse. Igniting a Nation is pleased to present Revealing the Bible, recorded and taught each week before a live audience. We take you deeper into the actual Bible and verse in both Hebrew and English, and connect the dots between the Old and New Testament. You can attend our 2 classes in Tuscaloosa and Birmingham, or watch the program every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Central Time on ignitinganation.com and all our other simulcast outlets. For more information, visit www.ignitinganation.com/events. Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker, and we're talking with Dr. Mark Baker, author of Overcoming Shame, and Jesus, the greatest therapist who ever lived. Mark, welcome back to this very special edition as we're talking about something very important, and that's suicide and the recent loss of Jared Wilson, a prominent pastor in California who ran a suicide outreach group.
Right. It's a very important subject. And I want to go back and touch on something you just mentioned a few minutes ago about coming to the realization that you're not alone, that those in the pastorate especially feel isolated. I remember when I was, it was only campus ministry, but I was known as the campus pastor. I remember that. And I remember everyone treating me like I was different. And I sort of got the message that I wasn't supposed to do certain things. I certainly couldn't drink, and there was no swearing allowed. And there was, you figure out what it is that no one could tolerate. And then it was, well, I couldn't share any weaknesses and I couldn't have any doubts. For them, faith meant absolutely no doubt. Well, that's not the definition of faith. Faith includes doubt. Knowledge, there's no doubt, but faith includes doubt. There has to be doubt. But I was young, I didn't know. And so I remember feeling isolated, and that isolation is where depression thrives. Mm-hmm. And what we now know psychologically is that we are not hardwired to do well alone. None of us are. We are fundamentally relational creatures. And I can deal with pretty much anything, as you and I have experienced just recently, if I don't have to deal with it alone. That's what makes us different. As created beings on this planet, we were created for relationship. And whatever my struggles are in life, I can deal with them better if I'm not alone. We know this to be a psychological truth, and of course, if we read the Bible, we know it to be scripturally true. That's just how we're ontologically made. And particularly for those in the ministry, we are told to believe, but you've got to deal with it alone, because I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear your flaws. And some of my closest friends over the decades are pastors. And it's because we can get together and not feel alone. I was very close to a man named Rick Stedman, who's a pastor in seminary. And then he went off and started from scratch a church. He literally set up a card table at a shopping mall, he and his wife. And as people would come by, he said, do you have a church home? Well, we're going to start one this Sunday. You're welcome, And people would come by and he'd hand out a flyer. I mean, didn't seem like a good marketing strategy to me, but that's the one that he took. He built a church of 5,000 people up in the Sacramento area with that faith. He stepped out on faith, right? And was consumed by that. And we kind of lost touch because he was just doing this thing up there and I was doing my thing down here. And then he experienced a huge betrayal in his congregation. After it grew up to this huge size, you can imagine the politics are involved in a church that big. Right. And he had a church split that resulted with deception and ego and people who were jealous. And it's a long, complicated story, but you can imagine this happens. It was devastating for him, devastating for him. These people he had loved, and he had grown them up to be in this thriving community would literally be so divisive. And 2,000 people split off from his church to create another church led by a young pastor who wanted that. He wanted that, right? And Rick went on, and he was there for years, and now has stepped off into a different ministry. But here's the end of the story. We've reacquainted our need for each other. And now once a month, I drive 2.5 hours north, and he drives 2.5 hours south so that we can have lunch on a Friday together to not be alone, so that I can share with him my struggles. And some of our lunches are more about me talking about my failings and my struggles as they are about him talking about his betrayals and his wounds. And the truth is, we don't really solve a lot of those problems when we're together, but I feel I can be real honest with him and he can be honest with me, right. And we're better men because of it. That God meets us there in that moment. And I learned things afterwards because of that.
I found out during my betrayal that I don't know if it's a pillar of psychology. But people get to the point where the more you know about them and about their problems, and the more times you've been involved with them, and the closer you grow in getting to know that their daughter is a lesbian, and another one is a drug addict, and another one is a prostitute, and they have all these problems, and you know all about it, that all of a sudden they get to this realization at some point saying, uh-oh, he now knows all of it. What if he tells somebody? What if he uses that against us? And all of a sudden there becomes, from this incredible closeness to all of a sudden this iceberg wall that forms, and you see a radical change, and you have no idea. As a matter of fact, in this particular situation, I spent the night in a hospital room with this person because the family had another situation. There was nobody to stay with him, so I spent the night there. Right? Drove him home when he got discharged from the hospital, which was way, hours and hours away from where I needed to be. And within 2 weeks, this family had so violently turned against me because I now knew everything about them. The fear that I would go public with that information turned them into mortal enemies.
This is shame's lie. Shame's lie is this: if you know the truth about me, you will find me unworthy of whatever my life is, whatever my status is, whatever I say is true about me. Shame tells me, if you really know me now, you will expose me as unworthy of my life. So the thing that shame does most is hide. Shame says, you must hide. You must hide. That's from the garden on. There was no shame in the beginning, and it's when we become self-aware that we needed to cover ourselves, and so these people needed to hide because shame was triggered there. And here's the tragic lie of shame. Shame says you must hide. Oh, you know things about me, so I must hide from you. I must put up a wall from you. The only healing for shame is the courage to be vulnerable and experience grace. The only way those people could ever experience healing for their shame is to have the courage to be vulnerable with you and then experience grace in your presence. That is the only way they can heal it. What they've done is sealed themselves in a debilitating, toxic emotion of shame by cutting you off. Because we're, as I said, fundamentally relational. And we need that exposure to our shame and the experience of grace in it in order to be healed. That's the only way it can be healed. And I think it is tragic, and this is why I think we're seeing an increase in suicide over these last decades of prosperous, is because as we've become more prosperous, we've become less religious. Our world and our society, especially in America, we've stopped going to church. People have stopped seeking God. Young people in the ages of 15 to 25 who are committing most of the suicides, if you ask them on a survey, are you religious? Most of them are saying no. They'll say, I'm nothing in particular. And that is the fastest growing religious affiliation in our culture today. That's the reason that we're becoming more suicidal, because we've lost our connection to God as a culture. We're moving away from Him, and we're moving into isolation, and that is toxic for the human soul. And so those people, as a generation, are becoming more suicidal because they're moving away from the truth that no vulnerability and openness to God and others is where strength is. Not through isolation and believing, oh, well, God's irrelevant. Going to church is irrelevant. I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious. And I don't really need other people or even need a personal God in order to be a good person. And that lie makes me isolate. And I'm more susceptible to depression, to shame, to hopelessness, and to suicidal ideation. So I want to say this. I think this is important. If we as believers have someone in our life that we think are depressed, We find them making statements about hopelessness. They seem to feel excessive guilt. And you're around them and they just seem to be down all the time. They've lost interest in the things that used to be joyful for them. They seem fatigued. They're having concentration difficulties. These are all signs of depression, and you know it when you see it. It's not just sad for a little while because we're all sad.
Right.
No, it's prolonged. 2 weeks or longer. 2 weeks or longer. They're in this spot. They can't get out of it. 2 weeks or longer. Then you ask them the question. You're not going to put the thought in their mind, and the question is, have you ever thought of hurting yourself? Ask them that question. You will not be giving them the idea. If they haven't thought of it, they go, oh my gosh, no, are you kidding? I love myself too much to ever do that. I've never think of that. Or you're going to get, yeah, you know what, I have had that thought. Then you've opened up a vulnerable conversation where you have the opportunity to offer grace to that person. This is an opportunity for healing of the shame that comes with those thoughts. Because this person, if they admit this to you, if they're a believer especially, they're going to be ashamed of themselves for having that thought. And that's a lie. That's where you can encourage them to seek help. The help of talking with you, of course, but the help of professional counseling. If they've got this thought of hurting themselves, they need professional help. And I'm going to say this is so true. And many times they are going to often need an antidepressant medication. I am not opposed to medication when it's necessary. And there are times when it is, and a professional needs to make that decision. You can't make that choice on your own.
No.
You need to get professional help to know, am I in that place where I have this disease that requires a medicine to help restabilize my brain? And you take it for a few months, and then you restabilize your brain, then you don't take it. But it's to help you restore the balance you were created to have in your brain. And if you broke your leg, you'd go to a medical doctor. So if your brain's got something broken in it, you need to go to a doctor to help you with that too. And we need to have the courage to go to this spot and invite that kind of vulnerability where we can show grace, where we don't shame them. This is not a lack of faith. This is the presence of depression. These are two different things. And I can't stress that enough. We need to have the courage to be vulnerable and then show grace in those moments. I have sad thoughts too. I've had struggles too. I've gone to a counselor myself. I'm very open about the many years I spent in psychotherapy myself to encourage others to do the same, to seek the help we needed and not live with shame's lie that we're supposed to isolate and do it on your own. That is an unchristian and unbiblical concept of doing it on your own. So I encourage people who are having these thoughts to seek the help they need. Healing is there if you seek it. Healing is there.
As we take a look in the Bible, which is my ruling guide, it's your ruling guide, we see that there were moments where Moses said, take my life. Elijah said, take my life. Jeremiah, the weeping prophet, was constantly in a state of depression over the condition that he was dealing with. There were lamentations, lamenting. That's we go through this. These are natural, and God uses these people as examples that you will go through struggles. That you, he never promised that he wouldn't take you to the desert. He never promised Moses he wouldn't take him to the desert. That's not a promise that's been made. Benny Hinn coming out and saying, listen, what I've been telling you has been wrong, this prosperity gospel. Part of it is true. There is a prosperity gospel, and that is that you will spiritually will have prosperity. Financially, there's no promise, but spiritually you will be prosperous. And if you really honestly are struggling with a problem, talk to somebody. It's not a matter about being embarrassed. Every one of us, I have said many times in this program, both with Dr. Mark Baker, with Dr. Timothy Jennings, who's with us every month talking about the aging brain. We talk about depressive thoughts. We talk about things that cause us, foods that cause us, lifestyles which cause us, circumstances we put ourselves in. But today, there's a clarion call that I want to put out to say that the church needs to address mental illness within their own community and stop putting a stigma on mental illness and a stigma on counseling and the stigma on antidepressants, and get your staff, your wife, your children, your family members, whoever needs help, get them the help that Jared Wilson didn't get and wound up taking his own life. Let him be an encouragement to you to not ever let it get that far. Dr. Mark Baker, thank you. Thank you as always for sharing with us here on Revealing the Truth about overcoming shame and dealing with many of the issues that we as believers struggle with every day. Thank
Amen.
you, my friend. God
Thank
bless
you. Always good to be with you.
We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll bring you the next edition of Revealing the Truth.